All right, welcome back. Today I'm going to cover roundworms in its entirety and then start arthropods and just talk about the basic body plans with arthropods. We are done with the lophophores, okay, that special U-shaped structure. We are now in the ecdysozoans, as you can see here. You know, we started off with protostomes, talking about platyzoas, lophotrochozoas, how they are spiral cleavage. Now we're moving on to the ecdysozoans with nematodes, and then we'll start arthropods, and then that will conclude chapter 34 here. So roundworms, also known as phylum Nematoda. So here we go. Basic structure, bilaterally symmetrical, unsegmented, and it is covered by a flexible, thick cuticle that will shed or molt as it grows. No specialized respiratory organs still. It will use the cuticles instead to exchange gases. We also don't have any circular muscles on the inside, so they lack circular musculature. So when they shortened, they don't change diameter. So remember what I said with earthworms, when they shorten, they get thicker or fatter. Well, here when they shorten, they don't change the diameter, they stay the same. Okay. Well-developed digestive system, and the mouth may have stylets, which are Pearson organs. Reproduction and development, they do sexual reproduction with internal fertilization. You'll also notice that we have sexual dimorphism within species, which means that you can tell the difference between the sex. So males, their tail is hooked; with females, it is straight. So that's what sexual dimorphism is. It just means the males and the females differ in form. You can tell this with like pheasants. You can tell the difference between males and females with pheasants, as well as a lot of other species of birds. Development is indirect, which means the egg will hatch into a larva, and then it goes through a series of molts. And the reason why nematodes are so important is we actually use them in our genetic and developmental studies. In one species, the C. elegans, we know exactly the fate of every single cell in that organism. So C. elegans, they mature in about 3 days. Their body is transparent, and it has 959 cells in its final adult form. And it's the only animal who that we know the complete developmental cellular anatomy. It's like mind-blowing. It starts off with like over 1,000 cells, and then through apoptosis and cell differentiation, then it trims down to 959, and we know the fate of every single cell in that embryo. Mind-blowing. Lifestyles of the nematode. Active hunters. Okay, they will prey on protists and other small animals. A lot of them are parasites of plants, or they are parasites of animals, and they live within the bodies of these animals. Almost every species of plant and animal that we've studied, they have at least one parasitic species of nematodes. Now, nematodes, they are abundant in the soil. If you were to, I think, look at a centimeter by a centimeter square, it's like millions of nematodes in there. So they are extremely abundant everywhere. So some nematodes that can cause some human diseases. There's about 50 species. Come on in. It's okay. I'll just stop my recording. It's fine. Come on in. Yeah, it's fine. They can fast forward.
Sorry. Sarah and I were talking to, Marty had mentioned that, I don't know if it was word or whatever, but future classes doing the senior banners too down Main Street.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That, I don't know if the parents will have to pay for or what, because that was a couple thousand.
Okay.
So
Good to know. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk to the class and see.
I will definitely catch. Yeah. I got them 4th hour. So.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's a great note. I would have completely blanked on that.
Well, I had forgotten. Thankfully, Sarah
Yep.
was in on that conversation. Thank you, Brittany.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. Budgeting for classes. So moving on to, anyways, nematode, human-caused diseases. First up, the most serious of all the nematodes is a nematode called the Trichinella. I just butchered that. causes the disease that's bolded here. I don't know why my mouth is not working correctly. But they live in the small intestine of some mammals, and then when the females are fertilized, they'll burrow through the intestinal wall to release their live young, and then they enter the lymph channels, and they spread throughout the body, and they mature, and then they form highly resistant calcified cysts. So yeah, not good. Pinworms are nematodes, prevalent in children. These are the guys that are responsible for making their butts itch. So the adult pinworms live in the human rectum, and you know, if kids scratching their butt a lot, you never know. The Ascaris lumbricoides, intestinal roundworm, 1 in 6 people worldwide are affected by these species. It's very rare, however, in areas with modern plumbing. The filariasis, the tropical disease, they're just the species of worms that tend to live in the circulatory system, and like I said, it's very common in the tropics. And this last one, we'll just call it the W. Bancrofti, can cause elephantiasis. So that is when, I'm sure you've seen pictures, and I was going to put pictures on here, and I just totally forgot. So you can Google it. But the lower extremities swell, and you get this disfiguring of proportions. I mean, we're talking like big. It almost looks, it's big like an elephant's foot, and it kind of looks like that because, yeah. But anyways, the worms, what they're doing is they're clogging lymph nodes, and they cause this severe inflammation and swelling. So yeah, elephantiasis. Okay, arthropods. This is the final section of this chapter, and I will not be able to get through it all. We're only on slide 76 of 121. So I'm just going to talk about the key features of arthropods, and then when we see each other again, I'll talk about the classes of arthropods and describe some advantages and disadvantages of the exoskeleton. So a little bit of an introduction here. Arthropods are the most successful of all animals. Okay, animals. When it comes to animals, arthropods win out because they are the largest class. 2/3 of all named species are a type of arthropod, and they are extremely successful. The majority of them are small in nature. Most are only a few millimeters in length. But arthropods is so important due to how they affect our lives and how they shape it. They are a food source. We eat arthropods. I'll talk about some, you're like, ew, bugs. But then, when I go through some of the arthropods, you're like, oh, okay, there's more to arthropods than just insects. We compete with them for food, and they can damage our crops, but, they can damage our crops. And then pollination in crops, so they can help pollinate and spread pollen, which is a big deal because otherwise, our flowering plants wouldn't come to seed. So the kind of a breakdown of the arthropods here. Beetles making up the largest chunk of the pie, followed by flies, moths, and butterflies. And then we have bees, wasps, ants, and some other interesting insects. Now, crustaceans are part of the arthropods, making up 3.4%, so like lobsters, decapods, crayfish. Spiders, arachnids, 5.2%, and then again we have some other arthropods here. But your book is basically going to talk about the 4 classes, and I don't have any bullet points on this, so if you want to write 4 classes, the Cheliceratia, Crustacea, Hexapoda, and the Myriapoda, or Poda, we'll go through a lot of these. In fact, I will go through some of the members of these classes. So remember in our organization, King Philip came over for grape soda. Okay, so King Philip came, these are classes, and then over is orders, and so we'll talk about some orders within these. But basically, these are going to be ticks and mites, and why they're called that is they have specialized mouth parts like pinchers or fangs. Crustacea, their appendages, I'll talk about how they are 2-branched, and the head has 2 pairs of antennae. Hexapoda, poda means leg, hexa means 6, so they have, this is the class with 6 legs, okay? And then the Myriapoda, basically numerous segments, a lot of legs, centipedes and millipedes. So we'll spend some time kind of going through some of these orders, members of these classes. But for your notes, I would just say, chill rat. I would just write or type this. Okay, so I'm going to talk about basic features, the body plan of an orthopod, and there's 8 of them. Okay, so the first one's called jointed appendages, and this was, let's just talk about the name orthopod. Orthopod means jointed feet. Okay, so the advantage of orthopods with their jointed appendages is that it enables them to extend and retract by bending. Could you imagine if your arms and legs could not bend? I mean, just if they were just stick. Yeah. So joints, they serve as a fulcrum. I'm just going to talk a little bit about physics. So remember, a fulcrum's kind of like a, with a teeter-totter, like if this is the teeter-totter, the you sit here and your friend sits here, and in the middle there's a triangle. That's the fulcrum, and you can go up and down and rotate around it. So joints serve as fulcrums. Think about your elbow. Okay, a small muscle force on that fulcrum on a lever can produce a large movement. So just by simply bending your elbow, I mean, the tip of your fingers, they can move a great distance to cover a wide range of area. So with these jointed appendages, we have a lot of efficient modes of locomotion, a lot of different modes for locomotion, species that enable them to jump, to crawl, to swim, so to grab, defense, pinch or crabs. I mean, it's just a lot of specialized parts here. So appendages include the antenna, okay, the mouth parts, the legs, the wings. So lots of appendages here. So the many, many limbs and functions, just like looking at a crayfish, we have some that are responsible for sensory, some that are responsible for defense, the feed-in, the walk-in, the swim-in. Okay, so that's like the first major innovation in body was segmentation with annelids and then developing appendages on those segments. And so this jointed appendages has made orthopods the most successful of all the animal groups. Okay, so you can see that they are specialized in a lot of different features here. Second kind of basic body plan is the exterior skeleton, known as the exoskeleton, made up of chitin and proteins, very strong and flexible, provides places for muscle attachment. Okay, so they attach to the interior on the inside of a hard exoskeleton, and it protects the animal from predators and helps reduce water loss. Okay, so when the crunch of a squish, when you squish a bug, that crunch that you hear is caused by that exoskeleton. So it's basically just this mosaic of chitin and protein hard plates that protect and support the soft inner body of that arthropod after you squish it, right? And so humans and other vertebrates, we have an internal skeleton made of bones, but arthropods, they don't. They're only exoskeleton kind of keeps them from collapsing into soft blobs, if you will. Okay, so like I said, this exoskeleton is a great evolutionary innovation. It's kind of like a suit of armor, as you can see in my little comics here, operated by muscles attached to it on the inside. So, yeah. I'm gonna move on. Oh, no, I gotta talk about segmentation here. So they are segmented, and they are not related to annelids due to molecular evidence of it. At one point, they were sister taxons or pretty close to it, but no longer. I'm gonna talk a little bit about tagmata later on, but basically functional groups. So with the arthropods, they usually kind of subdivide the organism into 3 parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And sometimes the thorax and the abdomen are fused together, but from these 3 or 2 groups, that's basically where all the appendages extend from. So here's a cross-section of some type of arthropod, but you can see the muscles on the inside being attached to it, and they'll contract to help it move, and it's like a suit of armor. So muscles that move the appendage, muscles within the appendage help it move. Here's another picture just showing muscles on the inside working on that fulcrum, that lever, so it can move. Here's a picture of the cuticle, the epicuticle, the procuticle, making up the cuticle. Third basic body plan is molten. Okay, growth with the exoskeleton. So we have a suit of armor, but these organisms still need to grow. So the only way they can grow is by shedding that armor and growing a new one from within inside. And so this is called molten or ecdysis, shedding of the outer cuticle layer controlled by ecdysteroid hormones. Now, molting is a very dangerous undertaking for a lot of arthropods. Okay, it's not a slam dunk. I remember my professor describing it as like, imagine yourself in a scuba suit, like head to toe scuba suit, and you have a nasty sunburn, like a really, really like nasty sunburn, and you're trying to get out of the scuba suit. It's kind of painful. Arthropods, when they do ecdysis, they shed not just the outer body covering, but their eye surfaces, their inner lining of their foregut and hindgut, the lining of their, internal passageways, everything, even leading up to the respiratory system. It's all too easy for this arthropod to, they could tear off an eyeball or a leg or get stuck, and if they get stuck, it leads to death while it's trying to shed its armor. So a lot of times these organisms will hide so it doesn't get preyed on. So like once it frees itself, and I'm going to show you a picture on the next slide, it will eventually free itself, and then it's incapacitated. It's got to wait for its armor to harden. So it may look strong and move around, but without that hard exoskeleton, it's easy prey and really can't defend itself. So let's see so it sheds the old one by a fluid, dissolves the chitin and the protein, the fluid increases, and it pops open, and out emerges a new soft exoskeleton that will expand, and then given time it will harden. So here are some pictures of arthropods going through molten or ecdysis. Horseshoe crab, I don't know what that is. Cicada maybe? Another crab here. Okay, another key innovation or characteristic of arthropods, the compound eye, composed of individual visual units, thousands of them, called ommatidia. We find them in insects, crustaceans, house centipedes, and the extinct trilobites. And each one is covered with a lens, that's a typo lens, that includes a complex of retinicular cells and light-sensitive core called a rhabdom. So this entire thing is the ommatidium, and just looking at one little individual unit here. Okay, and there's the rhabdom right there. We also have simple eyes called the ocelli, which means they have a single lens, and sometimes they occur together with compound eyes, mostly with the insects, but their main job is to distinguish light from dark. So with vertebrates, we have a simple lens eye with receptors on the background and cornea, but with the simple eyes here, there's no lens, okay, and with the compound eye, which was on the previous slide, basically the ommatidia. Okay, another body plan characteristic is the circulatory system. It's open, okay, blood flows through cavities, not through closed vessels, and it does have a muscular vessel, somewhat of a heart that kind of works as a heart, but not necessarily. A lot of times with body plans of insects, you'll have a vessel that runs near the dorsal surface of the thorax and the abdomen, and then when it contracts, blood will go to the head region, and when it relaxes, it'll go back to the posterior region of the heart. So not really a true heart, if you will, but close. So here with the grasshopper, which is another species you'll dissect, we have a heart, and the hemolymph, that's the blood, and it kind of pools into area, but eventually it'll come back to the heart and be circulated through. Whereas with closed, it travels entirely within the vessels. Okay, another body plan feature we should discuss is the nervous system. So, brain, but not much, and we still see ganglia, so clusters of nervous tissue, but at the anterior head, the head, we do see 3 fused pairs of these dorsa ganglia, which is going to constitute for the brain. So a lot of activities controlled by the dorsal ganglion here, and they carry out functions when that brain, so I was going to actually say the wrong thing. So there's been studies where they've removed the brain, but the ventral nerve cord still carries on a lot of the functions of that organism. Respiratory system is really unique in insects. So it depends on the respiratory system instead of the circulatory system to bring oxygen to those cells. So it depends entirely on the respiratory system to get the oxygen that it needs. So all parts of the body need the respiratory passages, and they're called, we have like tiny little openings in our armor called spiracles. Okay, so I'll show you that, but the thickness of the exoskeleton does put a lot of limitation on the respiratory system. So how does this organism breathe through its armor? Well, it does have some small little openings called spiracles. So air travels through these openings, and then they open and close by valves to help reduce water. That's an adaptation, very similar to like a stomata in a plant. But then the tracheae is small and branched, and it's cuticle-lined air ducts. And then it will branch off even smaller into the tracheal, a series of small little tubes that transmit oxygen throughout the body. So the spiracle's the opening, enters the trachea, big tube, if you will, and it will branch off into smaller ones called the tracheal. That's how it works. So the openings are the spiracles to the trachea to the tracheals. Okay, and the final body plan, the excretory system, getting rid of the nitrogenous waste. So in these arthropods, you'll see the Malpighian tubules in your grasshopper, slender projections from the digestive tract, attached at the midgut and the hindgut, but it helps get rid of nitrogenous waste. So let's see if I can find that. Here's the Malpighian tubules right there. So this is how nitrogenous wastes are eliminated. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. Yeah, even though this video is only 21 minutes long, but I'm sure in class there'll be plenty for you to type your way through, and we'll carry on with the 4 major classes of the phylum Arthropoda. So we got a lot still to cover, and we are on slide 94 of 121. So I'll see you later.